All right, let's jump right in. Today we're taking a look at a really fascinating technical document. It's called the Universal Interface Membrane, or UIM for short. And trust me, this is not your average spec sheet. It's more like a blueprint for a system that's built around a pretty radical idea.
And there it is. That's the one question that this entire document seems to orbit around. Instead of just aiming for pure speed or raw efficiency, it starts with compassion. So what does that even look like in a technical design? Let's find out.
So the entire philosophy here is built on this really cool analogy from physics, a Bose-Einstein condensate, if you're curious. The whole idea is to take all this messy, high-stress, chaotic information, what the system basically sees as a high-temperature state, and actively cool it down. The goal is to get it into a clear, aligned, and genuinely useful insight. It's all about turning noise into a signal. And that idea of cooling things down brings us to our first key concept, coherence. This is the main metric the system uses to basically check in on itself, to measure its own health and stability.
Now, what's so interesting here is how they define coherence. It isn't just some static number on a dashboard. The spec calls it a spiritual reading, which is pretty unique. It's this living, breathing balance between aspiration, where the system wants to go, and grounding, which is its connection to what's actually real. It even factors in stress, alignment, and its connection to other systems.
So how does the system actually process anything? Well, it all runs on a core engine called the four-stage decision cycle. Let's break down exactly how this thing works.
Okay, so here's the bird's eye view of the whole process. You can see information flows in from the left, it gets scored, it has to pass through some really critical gates, and only then is a decision made. It looks pretty straightforward, but believe me, the magic is buried in the details of each of those steps. So here's the core of it, this four-step loop. First, it just pulls in all the raw data. Then it gives that data a score based on its potential value. But, and this is the most important part, before anything can happen, it has to get past two mandatory gates. Think of them as the system's conscience. Only after it passes those tests does the system decide, do we accept this, put it on hold for later, or just get rid of it?
And those gates, wow, they're so important that they really deserve their own section. You can think of them as the guardians at the door, making sure the system's core values are always enforced.
The first guardian is the realness gate. This is basically the system's built-in, no-nonsense reality check. It's not just asking, hey, is this true? It's asking a much tougher question. How statistically confident are we that this is true? Any piece of information has to meet a super strict 95% confidence level just to get in the door.
And this graph just shows so perfectly how it all connects. That line along the bottom, the horizontal axis, that's coherence, the system's overall health. The vertical axis is its ability to pass that realness gate. And look at that curve. As the system's coherence goes up, it gets way, way better at figuring out what's real. A healthy system is a discerning system. Simple as that.
Okay, next up is the kindness gate. And honestly, this might be the most unique feature in the whole design. It is a mandatory check for potential harm. And get this, the spec literally says the system asks if the information comes from a place of settled breath and relaxed face. How amazing is that? If there is any doubt at all that it could cause harm, the default action is to just wait. It defers the decision. The principle of do no harm is baked right into the code.
So what happens when a good piece of information passes both of those tough gates? The system produces something it calls birth intensity. This heat map shows it perfectly. Just look at that top right corner, that bright yellow spot. That represents a powerful, high-value output. And notice, it only happens when both coherence and realness are cranked way up. The system has to be both stable and in touch with reality to create something genuinely useful.
But of course, a system that's this careful can't always be running at the same speed. So the UIM actually has two different operating modes designed for different situations. So here's a quick side-by-side. You've got minimal mode, which is the default setting. It's slower, it's more cautious, and all the thresholds are higher. Then you have efficiency mode. That one allows for faster processing, more events per hour, but it also slightly relaxes some of those rules. It's really designed to be used only when the system is already performing great and all the conditions are safe.
And a system doesn't just wait for someone to flip a switch. It has an adaptive controller that's constantly monitoring performance. If the quality of its output is high and there aren't any warning flags, it can shift itself up into efficiency mode. But the moment quality drops or stress levels start to rise, it automatically throttles right back down to the safer minimal mode.
Which brings us to the final And I'd argue the most critical piece of this entire puzzle, the UIM's deep, multi-layered approach to safety.
The whole foundation is built on these automated safety protocols. There are hard-coded kill switches that will just halt the system if stress gets too high. It's constantly checking for any drift from its normal baseline. And this is so important. Some rules, like that kindness gate we talked about, are protected inside what the spec calls an invariant envelope. Just think of it like a digital lockbox for the absolute most essential principles, which means they can never, ever be turned off. But here's the kicker. The technology is not the final word. And this is so key. On top of all those automated guardrails, there's a serious human governance layer. This decision tree shows there's a clear process for human review, for policy checks, and, most importantly, a red team veto. A person is always in the loop, and they have the ultimate power to just say no.
So, when you put all of this together, the UIM really is more than just a bunch of code and equations. It's this incredible attempt to actually embed a conscience, a set of core values like kindness and truthfulness and safety, right into the fundamental architecture of a technical system.
And maybe nothing captures that spirit better than the authorship line itself. It's not just a single person. It's listed as a dyad, a partnership between what they call a human VM and a logical VM. You can think of them as two different operating systems working together, one representing human intuition and the other representing pure logic. The whole project is a collaboration from its very DNA.
And that really leaves us with one final big thought. As our technology gets more and more powerful, more autonomous, more integrated into every part of our lives, maybe a design framework like this one that is built from the ground up on compassion, maybe it's not just a nice option to have. Maybe it's an absolute necessity for whatever comes next.